We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Alex Frank, your host of Locked On Bearcats. It's been a great week. Thanks to everybody who has listened. Thanks to everybody who has joined me on the show this week. And Russ Heltman's about to join me, my colleague at All Bearcats and Sports Illustrated. We've got a lot of stuff up on All Bearcats, including Russ's pregame or preview of tonight's game at East Carolina. He also has a look at the betting on tonight's game, the Bearcats and East Carolina. I've got a film review from the Bearcats win Saturday against South Florida, so looking forward to that. Russ is writing a ton of stuff for All Bearcats, and he's writing like 7 articles a day. Plenty of stuff on All Bearcats. Retweeted to both of our Twitter pages. For me at Frankie_Daddy, for Russ at Russ Heltman 11. Just so much stuff to get to. And again, the Bearcats win over USF on Saturday night. I really think it's an impressive win when you consider the position the Bearcats were in. This game was just simply all about weathering the storm and adversity without 2 of your best players. Victor Locken and Rob Finney. And I really feel like the Bearcats were able to do that with Odio Guama going a perfect 9 of 9 from the floor, with Jeremiah Davenport having one of his best games of the season, really one of his best games since that Wichita State game. So just a tremendous performance from him. And I look at what David DeJulius was able to do in more ways than just scoring. I look at what Landers Nolly was able to do with a double-double, even though he wasn't great from the field. I look at what this team was able to do in overcoming a halftime deficit against a USF team that isn't really good, but they play really, really hard. And they took it to them in the second half, outscoring them by 23 points. En route to a 19-point win. And they're still very much alive, the Bearcats, for that top 3 seed in the conference tournament. They're 8-5 in league play. They got to get this win tonight, East Carolina, to keep that going. But I really do think what you're seeing from the Cincinnati Bearcats is a true I think what you're seeing is a team that is still really, really bought in and committed to what Wes Miller is trying to bring to this program. And I know it hasn't been what a lot of us were envisioning this season. They've lost a lot of games that are frustrating. They've lost 9 games this year. I would say their most frustrating loss is Ohio State. Losing to Temple was frustrating at the time, but we now know Temple's really good. We also have seen them go toe-to-toe with Arizona. NKU is frustrating, but yet NKU is doing really well in the Horizon League. So, again, what you're seeing from Cincinnati is just a great resolve. And when you think about it, they were 2-2 in league play after losing to Houston. And they're 6-3 since then. And their losses are to the conference's best teams. As Mike Petraglia alluded to yesterday on this show, or earlier today on the show, I should say, the Bearcats are, they're beating the teams they're supposed to be, but they're not necessarily beating the teams that they shouldn't, and that can really help boost their resume. So a lot is still at stake for this team. They're 17-9, 8-5 in league play. They've got 5 games remaining in league play, including tonight, East Carolina, Sunday at UCF, and then next Wednesday when Russ and I join you again, that's going to be for the Bearcats and the Temple Owls, which I will be at. Russ will be at as well. So there's still a lot left to play for. I really do think this team is going to have a shot to get a top 3 seed in the conference tournament. And even if they end up getting that 4 seed, I really do think they could beat Houston in a semifinals matchup. Now, the problem with that is you might be so exhausted once you play Houston that you could run into some troubles against another really good team like a Tulane or, a Memphis in the conference semifinals. But I look at what this team has been able to do against those teams. It's not like they're getting blown out. Last year, there was the combination of getting blown out by good teams and then losing teams that they shouldn't lose to. This year, they're beating the teams they're supposed to be, but they're not getting extras. And with that, we bring in the driving force behind All Bearcats and Sports Illustrated, Russ Heltman, my colleague. Russ, it's good to have you back. It was good to covering you last Saturday, and looking forward to doing it again here a week from tonight. But we've got two important games to get, including one tonight at East Carolina that you think the Bearcats should be able to once again cover the spread, right, Russ?
Yeah, I think so. Depending on the status of Javon Small, obviously, for these Carolina Pirates, great to be with everybody in this Locked On Bearcats live room. Obviously, with his status up in the air, I think he got back on the court, according to head coach Michael Schwartz, in the last few days. Don't know exactly if he's going to play yet. Was a big impact player against UC last month. I think he had 23 or 25 points, 5 assists. Was really strong for the ECU team. Was a highly ranked recruit in 2020. Has blossomed well with that squad, and he's going to be a big bellwether to their chances of keeping it within single digits, which 9.5 point spread. That's kind of what am I looking for? What the intrigue is facing the Bearcats and their fans tonight. The intrigue facing this game is whether or not ECU can keep it within single digits. And I think they will be able to if Small plays. If he doesn't play, I have a hard time seeing them with just Brandon Johnson as the main offensive weapon, keeping it within 10.
All right, consider that a preview, and we got plenty more coming up right here on this week's live room of Locked On Bearcats.
Our Locked On Bearcats, your daily podcast on the Cincinnati Bearcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
As usual, we'll take your questions and comments in the chat at the end of the show. Thanks so much for making Locked On Bearcats your first listen every day. Thanks if you made today's episode earlier this morning your first listen every day. I was joined by CLNS Mike Petralia for his thoughts on the Bearcats win Saturday against South Florida and what to expect from them the rest of the season, as well as some thoughts on the gridiron. We'll get to that with Russ Heltman, my colleague at All Bearcats and Sports Illustrated here today. Russ, you've got a ton of articles on the website. I've got stuff on there as well from Saturday, 3 stars of the game, and a film review. I rewatched the game from Saturday. So let me ask you this. Was halftime on Saturday, was that a pivotal moment this season? If that doesn't go the way it ultimately did, if the alternative happens, Russ, is that a breaking point of this season if the Bearcats don't rebound and outscore USF by 23 in the second half?
I think somewhat. A little bit of yes and a little bit of no, because I don't know if we've gotten to the point. I think we might have already been past the breaking point of the season, and that was the blown lead against Houston to basically stick a nail in your at-large hopes coffin of getting into the NCAA tournament. If they lose to USF this past weekend, I don't think it really changes the trajectory of what they were facing the rest of the year at all. They probably would still be right in line, and the probable odds of getting a 4 to 5 seed, playing in that 4 to 5 game in the opening round, and then having to go face Houston the very next day in the quarterfinals of the AAC tournament. So I don't think it had a huge effect on their season trajectory either way, but it definitely helps to get one more AAC win and at least keep it within 2 games for that pursuit of the second or third seed in the tournament ranks.
No question about that. If we look at the standings right now, Cincinnati in 4th place, 8-5, behind Memphis, who's 9-3, Tulane, who's 9-3. Temple is tied with Cincinnati; they're 8-5. UCF is 6-6. So still some ways to go for the Bearcats to get to where they ultimately want to go, which is that 2 or 3 line, because I don't think you want to play Houston in the semifinals. So for those who are with us, Russ, do you have an update on Victor Locken ahead of tonight's game? I know Wes Miller kind of said at the post-game press conference on Saturday that he was going to call him every single day and get the status, but do we know definitively whether or not he's going to play tonight?
We do not. We will find out right when ECU finds out prior to tip.
All right, and that, of course, is a 7 o'clock tip on ESPN+. I'm not seeing anything from...
I will say, I said I would have been floored last week if he played against South Florida. I have moved from floored to I will be shocked. Actually, I will be moderately shocked if he plays tonight against East Carolina. I think it's going to be one of those things where you try to hold him and get to the weekend and try to get at least 10 days removed from the injury. But maybe the big Russian has healed a lot faster than you think.
Okay, so you're saying you'd be moderately shocked if he played tonight because you think that they're going to save him for this weekend's game, which, let's be honest, is a much bigger game than tonight's game.
Yeah, not that they're necessarily not that they're going to sit a healthy lock-in, which because Miller made that very clear. Once he's back to being able to get on the floor, he's going to play. But I just think one of those nasty high ankle turns like that, it's especially with a bigger player, it's better to be cautious, especially when you have a game tonight in ECU where you're a 9.5-point road favorite against a team missing their best player or with their best player coming back from injury. It's one of those things that I personally would not risk getting that thing re-injured. But we'll see what he ends up doing tonight.
Last ever trip for the Bearcats to East Carolina. They swept them last year. They're looking to do it again this year. They beat them earlier this season, 83-55. That game was at Fifth Third Arena. A terrific performance by Cincinnati. Hopefully they can do it again on the road tonight. They have struggled on the road this year, but this is a game that I would chalk up as a game that they should win. Russ, I'm sure you would agree with me there. We're going to switch gears to the hardwood. There was some news that broke yesterday that Russ, you wrote about on All Bearcats. A position coach who was hired by Scott Satterfield this offseason now is no longer part of the coaching staff. We'll get into that. Plus, if a player who you may not want as the starter, but he very well could be. We'll get into that after I tell you all how this episode of Locked On Bearcats is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. The midway point of the NBA season is here, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scorers and threes drained. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thanks again for making Locked On Bearcats your first listen every day. Make sure you check out our brand new podcast, Locked On College Basketball. Everything you need to know about college basketball in one place. Plus, hear from big-name experts, insiders, coaches, and players. Locked On College Basketball, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Alex Frank back here with you. Russ Heltman, my colleague at All Bearcats and Sports Illustrated in this week's live room. Russ, I was talking to Mike Petralia yesterday of CLNS Media, and he gave a prediction that certainly raised something inside of me, and it might raise something inside of you when I tell you and our listeners. But what chances do you give Ben Bryant to win the starting quarterback job? Is this even a remote consideration heading into spring ball that Ben Bryant could be the starting quarterback again for the Cincinnati Bearcats?
5%, just above 6%, because 5% is still in the highly unlikely range. We'll go 6%, just above extremely shock the world unlikely chances. Emory Jones is the presumptive starter. He's going to have to play horrible, in my opinion, in spring ball, and probably play horrible in fall camp to not end up being the day one starter when this team rolls the ball out in early September. So to me, Ben Bryant coming back to this program was largely a product of circumstance. You get hurt in the final couple of weeks of the season. You're not able, just like Josh Wiley, to go through these showcase games, the NFL PA Bowl, the Shrine Bowl, the Senior Bowl, all that stuff. Not able to participate in any of that. Not able to showcase your throwing skills for scouts anywhere else in the country over the past couple months. Not able to participate in any combine activities. All of that stuff, to me, showcases the fact that Ben Bryant, in my eyes, was going to try to go pro, did not get those chances afforded to him, now falls back to his one lone option, which is to come into spring camp, show that he's healthy there, try to push Emory Jones a little bit, and then I would expect him to transfer at the end of the spring window and get back into the portal and find a final college football season home somewhere else. But outside of that, unless Emory Jones gets hurt, maybe something like that, or Ben Bryant comes back and shaves a tenth of a second off his 40-yard dash time, can run the RPO like a savant, and adds a little bit arm strength as well, and he's a completely new quarterback. If that happens, sure, he could definitely be the quarterback of the Cincinnati Bearcats in year one of Scott Satterfield, but I think it's 6% chance, teetering on highly, highly unlikely right now. I would expect him to transfer in the spring window.
Interesting. So you think that Ben Bryant could end up transferring, even though he's still here?
I think it's much more likely that he transfers than he ends up sitting behind Emory Jones being the backup for a full season. Maybe he's okay with doing that. But to me, Ben Bryant, a guy that came to Cincinnati last year knowing that he wasn't going to be handing the started job and came for the competition, he's a competitor through and through. And he's a guy that I would think if he's going to be told you are the second stringer, you will only play in injury scenarios, then he would go somewhere else to one of the other 130 options around the country.
What would that do if he does transfer? What would that do for Evan Prater and his chances?
You'd think it would help him to be a meaningful part of the offense, but like Evan Prater's going to have to show, he's going to have to show a lot of improvement in spring ball to have any chance of getting the starting job. I think it's a pretty big chasm between what the coaching staff thinks of Emory Jones and what they think of the rest of the quarterbacks. A chasm in this aspect of they're not going to necessarily give these guys not going to necessarily tell them, hey, we don't want you to be here. We're going to kick you out the door. We don't even want to see what you can do in our offensive system once we get that fully fleshed out, which has been happening over the past couple of weeks. It was more so the fact that, hey, we understand what you guys have done for this program. We understand your talent. We're not quite sold on you yet. Come back in during the spring, all 6 of you, be able to just go at it one-on-one, head-to-head in spring ball. And then after a couple weeks there, we'll be able to easily slot you into hierarchies and tiers and be able to find positional rankings that way in terms of the quarterbacks and those 5 guys. So I would be shocked if Emory Jones is not coming out of spring ball. If he's not named the starter, at least a prohibitive favorite heading into the summer months.
Interesting. And I would agree with you on that. And we'll have much more on that as spring ball approaches. So earlier this week, I did my position rankings. Mm-hmm. And I think positions in football, you can group them in different ways. I said, okay, defensive backs, corners, and safeties, I'm going to make them secondary. So I did secondary all as one. Okay. And my rankings came out: defensive line number 1, linebackers number 2, quarterbacks 3, running backs 4, secondary 5, special teams 6, wide receivers 7, tight ends 8, offensive line number 9. If you missed that episode, that was Tuesdays. You can go back and listen to it. Russ, what position on this roster right now is is the strongest in your opinion? What position group on this roster right now is the strongest, in your opinion?
It's your first pick, and I don't think it's really even an argument. It's that defensive line. It has the most talent, it has the most experience, and it has the most, I think, game-changing impact potential given the system that Brian Brown is bringing and the impact that he had leading the nation in sacks for his defense did at Louisville last year. Yasir Abdullah, going to be a high level, not necessarily a first-round pick, but probably going to make some plays in the NFL, a guy with an impact player ability like that. Dante Corleone, the best returning player in college football going into 2023. You got that right, people. The highest graded player returning to the sport in 2023, according to Pro Football Focus, is Dante Corleone. Outside of that, I mean, you got Malik Van, he's coming back. You got Eric Phillips. You got so much talent along that line, along with some other guys, some freshmen that didn't necessarily get to cut their teeth at all in terms of meaningful snaps last year. I think it's going to be the strength of this team. And you could kind of tell that it's the strength of this team when you look at some of the analytics metrics starting to come out. S&P Plus, Bill Connolly's system has the Bearcats defense in the top 25, offense just inside the top 70. So it's pretty clear what the models project this team's strength to be once again in 2023, just like 22, 21, and 20. It's that Black Cats defense reigning supreme this decade.
Reigning supreme. Now let's go to the other side of the trenches, the offensive line. It might be my least or weakest position in my rankings. But, Russ, can you say that the biggest storyline heading into spring ball and maybe even the season is the offensive line? And who in the world is going to start up front to protect whoever the new quarterback is?
I'd say offensive line and corner. That's secondary. What outside of that safety battery, what is that secondary going to look like? Those two, I would say, 2 of the 3 overarching big positional group impact spots, you have some big question marks in terms of offensive line, defensive line, and your secondary. 2 of the 3 right there. You don't quite have a confident feeling how those are going to shake out Secondary, I would think a little bit more confident. There's a little bit more experience there, especially with, I mentioned last week, Jordan Young, the transfer from Florida coming in and being a boon there. But offensive line-wise, it's going to be maybe some younger guys more so than usual, Alex, and a lot of guys that haven't played together at all, any meaningful snaps. A kind of exact opposite situation from what we had last year when we were saying that offensive line was arguably a little bit stronger and the strongest part of the team more so than the defensive line in 2022. Luke Kandra, Trevor Radisevich, all those guys. How do those new names mix in? Deontay Wilder, I think his name was Deontay Wilder, the FCS transfer as well. So how is it all going to shake out of those 10 to 12 candidates to start along those 5 positions? A lot of them haven't played together, and a lot of them are a little bit greener in terms of the experience side. That's the biggest challenge for Tom Manning, Nick Cardwell, the offensive line coach, and Scott Satterfield, head coach, I think, to figure out offensive game plan wise, considering obviously the offensive line is important to every offense, but the zone rushing scheme that they run out of Scott Satterfield, the shotgun spread scheme, I mean, you're going to be putting a lot of onus on that offensive line, specifically probably Trevor Radisevich at center, to be making a lot of those checks at the line, adjusting the front, adjusting your protections, all that stuff. It's got to come together rather quickly, and you don't obviously get preseason games to figure all that out.
Excellent analysis there from Russ. And we're going to switch back to the hardwood. I got a question for you about Wes Miller, and I got a question for you about Landers Nolly and David DeJulius. We'll get into that after a word from 2 of our sponsors. Questions and comments in the chat. We will take those as soon as we are finished here on Locked On Bearcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Russ Heltman, my colleague at All Bearcats and Sports Illustrated, joining me today. So do you still have, and I asked this to Mike Petraglia yesterday or earlier today, if you listen to the podcast, do you still have any doubt if Wes Miller is the right man for the job?
No. I think any doubt, I have no doubt. I've never had doubt. Never have had any doubt. Wes is the guy. He's the guy until further notice. It's probably going to take a disastrous Big 12 slate next year and a rough non-conference start in 24 for me to start jumping off the bandwagon of Wes Miller. Just given the way he treats people, given the impact players he's been able to bring in a short time, given the situation he had to face after the John Brandon era wrapped up, just the way his players gravitate to him, the way just the entire kind of UC basketball family has felt a little bit more tight-knit ever since he took over. All of the things outside of what you can't control time-wise, which is your ability to bring in top-tier recruited talent, he's been able to hit, I think, a home run in all those aspects. It's just about guys like Davion Thomas that you brought in now, guys like Jizzle James, guys like Rayvon Griffith. 2 of those 3, Alex, got to be hits, or else, yes, the Wes Miller questions can start coming, because in football, Scott Satterfield knows this. He said it in a great piece to Justin Williams on The Athletic. Go ahead and check that out. He broke down kind of what Scott Satterfield's offense might look like, talked to some of his assistants and Satterfield himself. You're only as good as your players, is what Scott Satterfield told him. And Wes Miller understands that as well. That's why he is getting the players that fit his system, fit this culture. And we're going to start hopefully seeing some more of that player talent through line success in 23 and especially in 24, when there are really no more excuses in terms of the recruited talent shortfalls.
So you say you have no doubts, but do you think he needs to get better at situational coaching, like what happened at the end of the Tulane game? Like, can 2 things be true at the same time, Russ?
What do you mean situation? Like what? Like telling the team to go shoot layups instead of threes?
Yes. I think that's situational coaching.
I don't know. Like I said, we hammered through this last week, but one of those threes goes down. One of those wide open shots from the outside goes down. They win the basketball game. So,
and if you look at
I got no issue with it.
Yeah, and if you look at it this way, you didn't have a presence in the front court that you have now. We didn't know how good Odi Oguama was going to be in picking up the slack. So let's go to this question. Obviously, there's a game tonight. That's the most important game. But what emphasis are you putting on the game Sunday at Central Florida? Because, that to me is a game that you have to win. And yet it's not going to be an easy task for Cincinnati.
Yeah, they essentially have to win that game, because if you don't win that game, then you bring Central Florida right back into the mix in terms of getting a top 4 to top 5 seed. And if you get it's Alex, this team gets bounced to the losers bracket and the bottom 5 seeds, and they have to play 4 games instead of 3. You can really kiss the season goodbye at that point. So I agree with you 1,000%.
Oh, yeah.
UCF will be it's a must-win game, a little bit more so than this ECU game even is at that, because if you beat UCF Saturday, you guarantee with the head-to-head tiebreaker, even if UCF finishes with the same overall record as you and conference record, you guarantee that you will be ranked higher than them and get a higher seed. So I'm with you. Yeah, UCF is another must-win game, and it's going to be another quad 2 opportunity for this team that has answered the bell a little bit better in quad 2 chances over the past couple tries.
They have, and you're absolutely right. I mean, if they lose to UCF, they go to 6 conference losses. UCF is right behind them, believe it or not. And if you drop to that 6 line, you are going to have to play on that Thursday and 4 games in 4 days. I mean, that's not an easy task. You want to not play in the conference tournament until Friday. Bearcats have not swept UCF, though, since the 2017-18 season. If you can believe that, Russ. They have not swept UCF in 5 years. They came close in 2019, should have in 2020. They came close in 21, and last year they played them only 1 time and lost. Mm-hmm. So
Johnny Dawkins, man, he's built a strong program at UCF that is not going away in the Big 12.
Yeah, I was just about to say, not going away. So here's a question I've been wanting to ask you, and I think maybe I already have, but maybe we were on crunch time, so I want a more in-depth answer. Who is the most valuable and who is the best player on the team? Because, I think it's between Landers Nolley and David DeJulius. I mean, David DeJulius, Mike said this to me earlier today. His leadership can't be replaced. But you look at a guy like Landers Nolley, he's still having double-doubles when he has an off night. David DeJulius is too. So it's hard to maybe distinguish who's the best player. So who would you say is the best player between the two and the most valuable player between the two?
Well, the most talented player, the best basketball player between the two is Landers Nolley. By a hair, just a little bit. But the most valuable player on this team is David DeJulius. 11 straight games, Alex. You and I noted that in the press conference with Wes Miller of 5+ assists. He actually got there was a great social media interaction with I asked that question, like what is David's special skill that allows him to have seamless chemistry with not only Victor Locken, but guys like Odi Ogama, guys like Kalu Ezikpe. They can just come in off the bench into a starting kind of higher level minute role and be able to impact games just as much as Victor Locken can in those pick and roll scenarios with David DeJulius. And Wes Miller starts talking about Tyler Hansborough and how he never had 9 assists in a game, even though he played with Tyler Hansborough. It's amazing what David DeJulius has done to morph into a complete graduate level player in college basketball, to only let your turnovers increase by 0.2 per game this season, and to increase.
You should be getting those two. The Friday, that's the one. I think you already have.
Somebody talking back in the background.
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead. Sorry. Yeah, I have my headphones. I don't know why that picked up that sound, but that's okay.
All right. Anyway, yeah. David DeJulius.
So we're live, so you never know what can happen.
Right. Yeah, I don't know what that was. 5 assists per game this year, 6.6 in conference. It's just amazing the playmaking skills he's showing off and making it look easy at that. So I would say his impact offensively, paired with the way he just bulldog defends opposing guards, oftentimes opposing team leading scorers at the guard position, and is able to be the floor general of an offense on the other end. It's been a really impressive year, and it's been a really, I think, top impact year from David DeJulius, a little bit more so than Landers Nolley, who is playing great. He's played very well this season, is the top overall efficient player on evanmaya.com for the Bearcats this season, but is not quite, I would say, as efficient lately as he had been maybe throughout the early portions of the season. And given that fact, and the fact that David DeJulius is kind of the engine of the offense, I'd have to give it to DJ, just a hair over Landers Nolley. But it's a great question. It's a fun one to break down.
Fun one to break down. Right now, Landers Nolley, 13th in the conference of rebounding, is now currently outside the top 15 in terms of field goal percentage. In terms of three-point field goal percentage, Landers Nolley is second in the conference at 43.8. DeJulius at 40.2 is fourth. But the key is DeJulius is right now, Nolly is 9th in scoring in the conference. DeJulius is 15th. DeJulius is also 5th in the conference in assists per game at just over 5, and then 3rd in the conference overall in assists at 131, behind only Jamal Shedd of Houston and Kendrick Davis of Houston, which is, I mean, no two guys that you wouldn't want to be behind. He had to be behind any two guys. So interesting analysis.
How close is Locken to those two for you, Alex? Is it like a big gap, or is it kind of?
It's not a big gap. It's not a big gap, but like, I feel like you need Nolly and DeJulius more in bigger games than you do a Victor Locken, to me. Now, I could be wrong, because I think DeJulius can go get a bucket when you need it. I think Nolly can go get a bucket when you need it, because there's more elements to Nolly's game and DeJulius's game than there is to Victor Locken. Victor Locken lives in the paint, and that's great. That's his role, and he does it very well. But when you need someone like a Nolly or DeJulius to like make that extra pass to set up a great shot, and that doesn't have to mean a pass into the paint for Locken. It can be an assist to Micah Adams-Woods, who's standing alone on the right wing, who's really been playing well as of late. It can be, getting a rebound when needed. It can be just inspiring a defense to defend. So I don't think it's a big gap between DeJulius and Nolly and Locken. I think Locken is the 3rd best player on the team. I'd put Davenport number 4, but no, it's not a big gap to me, in my opinion. Real quick, I didn't touch on this earlier, Russ, but there's some news out of the football program that one of the assistant coaches that was supposed to be on the staff this year, Derek Nicholson, is inside linebackers coach. He is now off to the Miami Hurricanes. Can you add some more context to that?
Yeah, Nicholson, it's kind of just the way it goes in the coaching world. You go from assistant linebackers coach to outside linebackers coach to linebackers coach. Keeps moving up. Miami's a way better opportunity, way bigger program, way more money, all that stuff, yada, yada, yada. Probably got a way better contract. So, yeah, doesn't no qualms with Derek Nicholson. He's moving up in the world just like all of us are trying to do.
But the good news is the Bearcats still have their they still have their coordinators, including Kerry Combs and Walter Stewart along the defensive line. Let's see if we have anything in the chat. Oh, we do. This is a good day. Before we go, so Marty Gilliard's ghost. What kind of name is that? Is Wes Miller the issue? Not using his timeouts in the last couple of minutes of the Tulane game. Players throwing up poor 3-point shots. Late technical. Russ, you touched on that. I mean, that's not Wes Miller being the issue. Now, it's interesting. I'll touch on this one a little bit. In the moment when DeJulius was ejected, I was furious because that's your team leader. But then I thought about it more. That was a highly emotional game. You lose 2 of your best players, Locken and Finney. Yeah, you're gonna get fed up when you blow a 13-point lead and a 7-point lead. I can imagine, Russ, that's not a Wes Miller issue though. And Wes Miller got a technical as well. He was fiery just as much as DeJulius was. So my answer to that question is no, Wes Miller's not the issue. Russ, I'm sure you're in agreement with me on that, correct?
Yeah, don't need to add much more to it. Like, it was a brutal loss in that game. It was a brutal scenario. You lose your 2 best defenders. Your 2 best defenders on the roster active were Victor Locken and Rob Finney.
Yeah.
And then what happened, Alex? They gave up 123 points per 100 possession offensive rating for the entire game when those guys went down.
I've never, you put it in a way that I don't think any of us have had. I mean, Tulane scored 73 points in the second half in overtime, 73 points in 25 minutes of basketball. Yeah, and their three best players, Jalen Cook, Jalen Forbes, and Kevin Cross. I mean, they combined for 78 of those points. That's what good teams do. And the Bearcats weren't simply able to put the game away. Marty Gilliard's ghost also says, love the videos, been watching every day the past couple months. That's good to see. Marty Gilliard's ghost also saying, as well as any chance Brady Lichtenberg gets a shot at QB1. That's something we haven't really talked about. Russ, what is your take on that?
He's going to get a shot. We'll see. I've been seeing a lot of good video that ball's spinning strong out of Brady Lichtenberg's hands. He was out actually at Nippert Stadium last night, tossing with freshman receiver Ty Perkins, burning the midnight oil. So he's a guy that's putting in the work. We'll see if he's put in enough work, improved enough over the past 18 months, 24 months since he entered the program, to push Emory Jones this season, and we'll see. He's going to have his shot.
Yeah.
Like I said, I'm not confirmed from Scott Satterfield himself, but I'm sure what they sold these quarterbacks is we're going to roll everything out. You're going to each get a playbook. You're going to each have time to learn it, and we're going to figure out who is the furthest along with this program and with their talents. And it's, I don't think, going to be playing favorite to anybody. It's going to be a clean slate. And if Brady Lichtenberg's the best quarterback, he's the best quarterback, and he should start.
No question about that. Sean M. chiming in. If Ben Bryant is started, we are screwed. I don't necessarily agree with that. That's all I'm going to say. I'm going to tease that for Friday's show. So, Russ, we call that a tease in this business. So,
I love it.
I'm going to say I don't agree with that. Marty Gilliers goes to also saying, thank you, hoping the new guys can make a difference next season. Is that referring? I think he's referring to.
I think he was talking when you were asking me about Miller, if I still believe in Miller.
I think, yeah. And I do believe they will make a difference. So, no, I'm all in on Wes Miller. I still have some things that I don't like about the way he coaches, but then again, that may not be a complete and direct result of him. As you say, Russ, and as Scott Satterfield says, where you're only as good as the players you have. So there you go there. All right, so we got the Bearcats and ECU tonight. Russ, you will have your three-man weave. Would you like me to write a 3 stars of the game? I'm happy and willing to do that. I will be watching the game. All right, 3 stars of the game. I will be watching it live at Trivia tonight. I play Trivia every Wednesday night, but I'll be watching the game.
What's the theme tonight?
The theme, I don't know, but I suggested to my mom earlier that her team name should be NFL officiating. Never been better.
I like it. I like it. I'll get some laughs.
I think we're gonna go with that. It's at the Submarine House up here in Dayton, so nice. Good place if you haven't been there. Highly recommend. So we've got that. Sunday we've got UCF. That's an
early tip.
Thank goodness. Yeah, I
love those. Aren't those noon tips the best, Alex? Nothing better than noon games. There's nothing better.
Yeah, exactly. Can we get those in the Big 12? Because especially on a Sunday. Now, Russ, this is the first Sunday without football, so that's going to be a challenge for us, but we'll make it.
Unfortunately, for my sleep schedule and my 5 a.m. wake ups, there's going to be a lot more 9 p.m. tips going forward for Bearcats basketball than there had been before. So,
well, that's part of the gig, Russ.
Part of the Big 12 life.
Yeah, no question about that. But we're here. By the way, football scheduling note. You should bring that up here. We're kind of going off on random topics as we like to do at the end of our live room. So BYU is on a Friday night. Is that going to be a 10:30 kickoff potentially? I know there hasn't been an announcement.
No,
yet.
I don't think they don't do it like that. Do they? They don't. They might actually. I guess would they schedule a 10:30 Friday kick?
Let me see something here because ECU played them on a Friday night this past season. I'm going to look and see.
Because if it's a standalone game, because I know obviously they'll do that for like Pac-12 After Dark and all that on a full-fledged Saturday slate. But a Friday standalone game, you'd think they'd want to have that.
Okay. So ECU played on a Friday at BYU at 8 o'clock.
Okay, it's going to be at 8 or 8:30.
Okay, I can live with 8 o'clock. I mean that's nothing. That's
going to be a perfect sunset.
I do.
Second quarter. It's going to be nice.
I do. I would love if I'm able to be able to go to that game. I do want to end with this. And I said this earlier this week, but Russ, I know you haven't been on this week yet. So I want to take a minute and send on behalf of you and all Bearcats and Locked On Bearcats our thoughts and prayers to the ECU community. What they are going through after losing their longtime radio voice, Jeff the Voice Charles. This is their first home game since he passed away suddenly on their road trip to New Orleans last week. So very, 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 very sad what's happening down in Greenville, North Carolina. And I wish them all the best. I wish Jeff Charles and his family all the best and his friends, and just expressing our sincere condolences.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better than Alex right there. And I'm really glad you brought that up, Alex. Glad we didn't go through the kind of ECU final preview, final matchup here and not acknowledge that.
Yeah.
They justifiably postponed the game this past weekend against Tulane. That's why those two teams are still a game behind everybody else in the AAC scheduling. But that was justifiable, had to be done for sure. Mm-hmm. And they'll make that up at a later date. And we'll be thinking about the ECU community, especially tonight, as the Bearcats take on the Pirates.
No question about that. Russ Heltman, thanks so much for joining me today. I'll talk to you soon, all right? Well, I'll see you next Wednesday for some Bearcats in Temple. Maybe they'll serve us Philly cheesesteaks in honor of playing a Philly team.
We're going to have our first live room in the afternoon, and then I'll see you in the very same night, Alex. There you go. It'll be great.
We gotta do something for that. Ooh, you know what we should do? We'll do a live room from the golf course. Maybe we can.
Yes,
maybe,
that's what we were thinking. Yeah, we got to do one of those. We have
can
to do
maybe
a live room.
maybe we can work that out. But anyway, we'll work on that. Thanks so much for all of you joining us, Russ. Thank you as always for joining me. I'll talk to you soon. All right.
Yes, sir, Alex. Enjoy the games this week, and I'll see you next Wednesday.
Absolutely. Same to you, Russ Heltman, kind enough to join me today. Thank you for tuning in. I'm going to post this in podcast form immediately for those who missed it. And thanks, as always, for making Locked On Bearcats your first listen of every day. How about for your second listen, you check out our brand new podcast, Locked On College Basketball. Everything you experts Isaac Shade and Andy Patton bring you everything you need to know on and off the court. Plus, hear from big-name experts, coaches, and players throughout the basketball landscape. Locked On College Basketball, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. For Locked On Bearcats, I'm Alex Frank. This has been this week's live room edition. That was good. I like that one a lot. Thanks to contributing to the chat. Thanks to everybody who listened, including my mom and dog who are standing right above me, but that's okay. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks for making Locked On Bearcats your first listen of every day. I'm Alex Frank for Locked On Bearcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team